Welcome to the Heart of Money podcast, where we discuss the impact that money has on every area of your life and where you can learn to make smarter money decisions. Join our conversation as we discuss our past experiences, talk about how to make better money management choices, and in the end, make a commitment to being weird. Okay, I gotta set some parameters on this one, Bob. We gotta be nice to each other because we're both cheap. We're both tightwads. But there's a difference between being frugal and being cheap. So let's be nice and talk about what the difference is without throwing ourselves or any of our family members under the bus.
I would not say I'm necessarily cheap or frugal, but I do have this excuse of always saying, but I got it on sale. Even though I got it on sale doesn't necessarily mean I got the best price on it. I'm sure as soon as you said something about under the bus and,
yeah,
my wife is already shaking her head. She really needs to come back on the show to set us straight. Like your wife needs to come back on the show and set us straight too.
That, in this case, that's a risky endeavor.
Yeah, they'll just tell us we're cheap.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. We got to protect ourselves in this and not be totally, we have some dignity in this conversation.
Since when did you become image conscious? Come on now.
Before you did, you're still bald.
Yeah,
and yes, I'm going to use that one for as long as I can milk it.
You can, but the greatest thing is that I spent $30 on a set of clippers, and I didn't have to spend $30 at a barber, and I can do my own hair. Know the guy personally.
I don't either.
Every few weeks, I know when I need to cut it, and I have saved so much money. I'm sure I could have paid off the house if I just set that money aside every week.
What kind of barber do you go to that charges $30? Because that's not cheap.
No, $15 a pop, twice a month. It's probably not 15 anymore.
Dang,
it was 15, at least 15 when I was going to somebody that did it. But
okay, you want to talk about like truly frugal and cheap here. So I was so cheap that I would cut my own hair for years. Clippers, guard, no problem. Stood in the mirror, did it all the way around. Everything was great. Got married. My wife would trim the back of my neck and my ears where I couldn't see. Well, that's beside the point. The point is,
yeah, that's right.
I saved probably, hundreds of dollars a year, I'm just guessing, on haircuts. Maybe less than, I don't know. Doesn't really matter. But now I've got to the point where I am now frugal enough that I will pay for a haircut like once every 3 months. It's $11. I don't got to worry about it. So I pay like as much in 1 year as you do in 1 month on, and I have more hair. So what's the deal, dude?
I'm going to say I'm so cheap, I still don't go to somebody to cut my hair because they're not going to do as good a job as I do. And it doesn't matter who does the back of my head. I can do the back of my head without anybody having to worry about it. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's right. Like we said before, God only made so many perfect heads. The rest he had to cover with hair. I mean, I don't see what racing stripes you got in the back of your head, or, if you sneeze, do you get a whole chunk out of the back of your head? I don't have to worry about that. What I do have to worry about is these cold nights. When it gets into the teens and the 30s. Yeah, sunburn. Yeah. On my nose, especially. Frostbite.
Is there such thing as frostbite on a bald head? I'm curious.
That's a good question. I don't know. I wear a hat now. Years ago when I did landscaping
I think
in Texas, I had a guy tell me at for the company that I worked with, we did a lot of senior centers, senior care, nursing home type places. And I remember this one, and this guy's outside. He goes, "Son," and I'm probably in my late 20s, early 30s. It would have been late 20s. And the guy says, "Son, I don't know much, but I know that you'd probably be a whole lot better off if you wore a hat. And it stuck with me ever since. Because
There for
growing
a
up,
minute, I
I was
thought
told
you was
not
going
to
to
wear a
stop
hat
after he
because
said, I
then
don't know
I'd end up
much.
looking like this. Yeah. So, yeah, I grew up with a grandmother that told me that I shouldn't wear a hat because I'd go bald. And then when I didn't have any hair, because I wore hats, I guess, and I didn't wear a
You
hat, I was
should
told
wear
I
a
should
hat.
wear a hat to cover my balding head. Anyway,
I'm curious now about the frostbite, so I think you should do an experiment and see if it's report back.
yeah, yeah.
I'll send
I'll
you a
let
nice
you figure that
Christmas
one out.
gift
I'll
if it
let you borrow
works.
my clippers. How's that? Yeah.
I
Okay.
have a pair. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to say Khrushchev, Yeltsin, Gorbachev. That's who it was. Going to look like Gorbachev with a little spot on my head from frostbite.
Oh,
Maybe it'll
jeez.
be in the letter A. Thank you, Austin, for my frostbite quiz. It's like sticking my tongue on a frozen pole in the winter. We really
Yeah,
have
you should
gone
try
off the
that too
rails
to
with
see if it
this one,
still
and we're
works.
nowhere near. You can see if it still works. I'll let you do that one. We'll see who wins. That will not
Hey,
be
a
cheap and will
contest.
not be
I just want to see if it
frugal.
works.
Yeah. Somebody get the hot water.
So funny story
Oh,
about
and so
that.
we're going to be on
Yes,
episode
this is completely off topic because
7982.
we just this is a free and open conversation. There is no real point to this except talking about being frugal and cheap. So we're just going to go with it. But and since we can't throw family members under the bus, I knew a guy that whenever he was a kid, I heard the story straight from someone who knew him personally. It wasn't me, although I do know him personally. When he was a kid, he did stick his tongue either on a gate. I think it was on a gate because someone told him, "See if this will happen." Guess what it did?
Exactly what he thought it was going to do.
Exactly. I mean, there was no surprise. And to this day, 60 years later, he still gets reminded about it on occasion. It's kind of funny. You know who you are.
He who shall remain nameless.
What's even
because we know
funnier is
it
listening
wasn't
to
a
people
female
tell the
that
story
did
about it happening.
Yeah.
He, she, yeah. Anyway, so
So those
do
of
you
us are
claim to
just
be more
joining us.
frugal, or if you're still around?
Now that we're 10 minutes into the conversation, you know, all the people that were like, they left 2 minutes in.
7
They were like,
minutes
this
and
is, I'm
54
not listening to you
seconds.
guys.
That's I don't blame them. If this is your first episode, go back like 75 episodes and see what we're supposed to be talking about, and then come back. And this is the comedy hour. We need one of these every once in a while because we get so serious that it's hard to cut loose. And anyway, okay, let's get back to the main topic at hand. Let's try to anyway. Serious.
You got to your
You can't do it.
moment of zen there. Oh, I can do it. I mean, we started off with me being bald and how I'm so cheap that
You
I
still
cut
are.
my own hair because I can. I still am cheap. I don't care. Bald jokes do not
So
affect me.
would you say that you're cheap or frugal? Because there's honestly a big difference.
Depends on the subject matter.
Expound.
Expound. Well, I knew a guy who used super glue on his
Pontificate, as you would
shoes. I
say.
won't mention anybody. that
I'm
is
warning you.
cheap. That is not frugal. That is not frugal. Where you purchase the shoes might have been frugal. Might be a little bit borderline.
Hey, I'm
cheap.
talking about you, not me.
Me.
This question was directed to you.
Okay, so let's say that, and this will go back to a conversation we had earlier about just recently on Next Millionaire Next Door, buying things that are for function versus fashion. Um, and I think when we get to a certain point in having extra money, we can buy nicer things, but we don't necessarily need to. Um, Clothing, for one, I've got clothes that I've had for years. Don't need to buy something new. When it gets threadbare, yeah, I need to throw it out. Um, my bell bottoms are coming back in style. No, I don't have bell bottoms. It's just a joke. Um, I wasn't even
That's a really
alive when
bad
bell
image in
bottoms
my
were in
head.
style. Maybe they're in style again. I don't know. Depends on who you ask. But I think when I think of frugal versus cheap, I think of quality. I think of getting something that will last you through the day, through an event versus a couple of years. Um, we talked about cars as one of those things. That's a higher ticket item. You can get a good used car, or you probably can't even get a bottom of the shelf, back of the lot thing for much of anything cheap anymore. Um, but I think there is a build quality difference in vehicles, and there's a quality difference in clothing, and it depends on if the item is a commodity or not. And when I say commodity, I mean like food, like cereal. Cereal. Let's buy the
Mm-hmm.
Post Tostios versus the Honey Nut Cheerios or whatever it is. You know, do you really need to buy the Honey Nut Cheerios at any point in your life if you like the Toasted Postios or Posty Chostios or Toasty Cheesios, whatever they are? Um,
Cheesios, really?
Cheesios, Posty Toasty
That
Chosties,
was really
whatever.
cheesy, just so you know.
It was cheesy, like Chester. Um, but see, there's a lot of money that goes into advertising Chester Cheetah that you don't have to pay for when you get the bottom of the shelf
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But if you like the taste of Cheetos versus Post Toastio cheese Tostios, um, go for it when you have the money, or you don't buy them in the first place. I don't know. I think there are a lot of things that we realize when we go through, as we talked about the phases before, things that we had to have previously, that when we really look at things, we don't have to have them. We just get accustomed to getting them, and
Mm-hmm.
they're cheaper alternatives, and they're not necessarily even low quality. They're just different and might not have the name brand on them. Um, Now, to your point of cheap versus frugal, what is your definition of one versus the other?
Um, so comparing the two, in my mind, frugal is, like you said, it's making a wise buying decision. Do I need the higher priced item? Can I get by with the lower priced item? Do I need the item? Period. Would I be better off to save up and buy something nicer, or can I get by with something cheaper right now? Um, frugal is spending your money efficient, efficiently, wisely, or electing to not spend it for the right reasons. Not just because you don't want to spend money, but because that's not a good purchase. Cheap, in my opinion, is trying to get something for nothing, or trying to never spend money even on something that's worth money, or trying to get someone else to cover the tab even though you've got the money to do it, you just don't want to spend it. That's kind of how I define cheap on the extreme side. Now obviously you talked about if it's a cheap buy or a good buy. There is, you can um, can buy things cheap without being cheap. You can
Mhm.
get a discount or get a good deal or get it on sale. Um, you look for cheaper options, but you don't. You're not cheap, and you don't try to be cheap. Cheap, in my mind, is um, being the great value at most, when honestly, name brand is a little bit more normal, if that makes sense.
Say that again.
Did I get you on that one?
You got me on that one because I'm looking at cheap versus frugal, and I'm thinking of my $5 pullover that I'm wearing from eBay
Mm-hmm.
that cost $65 originally. You would call me cheap. I'd call that frugal. You can call me cheap.
I
I
would
don't
call
care.
that
I'm also
frugal. Also,
bald.
what
If you
I
haven't
would call
noticed.
cheap is wanting to get that $65 sweater for free, and not be willing to pay $5
Oh.
for it. That's cheap.
Mm.
Now, if you had the opportunity to get it for free, great. But if it's $4 or $5 and you still won't get it because it's not free, that's being cheap, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. Does that make sense?
I'm I'm looking at needing to get a tote to put something in because the one I had broke, and I really don't want to spend the abhorrent amount of money they're asking for it. And they didn't even put it on a Black Friday sale. So are you calling me cheap
Yep.
because I'm just not forking over the cash to go ahead and get it for the regular price because there's no sale price on it?
No, I'd be the same way.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're cheap too. I think we already established
100.
that. So it's a
I would
contest
try
to
to
see who's
find out
cheaper.
what's the
Look at
best
that.
deal I could
You
get it
win.
at.
Yeah. For the quality. To me, a big piece of that is quality. Being cheap is just get
Absolutely.
something.
Yep.
I can go and I'm going to throw Gap under the bus. I've got shirts that are 10 years old from Gap. I don't wear them very often, but I got them. They're thin. But at the time, I got what, 5 for $10 or something like that. I get compliments on them, which is funny to me. Cheap old Gap t-shirts. Not t-shirts, but button-up
Yeah.
shirts. I still have them. They're not threadbare yet. But then what? Gap is part of Old Navy and some other brands. I've got an American Eagle. Yeah, that dates me. I think it finally wore out and is threadbare. I think maybe that's another piece of being cheap versus frugal is not getting something new when you need to versus continuing to wear it with the holes in it
Mm-hmm.
or the
Are
frayed
you
collar.
setting me up for something here?
I'm not setting you up. I'm telling you, I've got a perfectly good brand new jacket that I could wear at any point, and I'm still wearing my 12-year-old jacket that's frayed because of my stubble here on the collar. Could I switch out? Absolutely. Do I? No. I will even say that I've gone so far to be cheap enough to say that I've thought about getting the permanent marker out to cover the fraying so you can't tell that that's old. That is cheap. That is cheap. My wife is hearing this
That's
going
clever, is
and
what
hitting her
that
head
is.
going, that's my... We're going to add a new definition. Okay. And at the 18-minute mark, if people are still listening to us, they're going, what in the world is wrong with these guys? Or maybe just the bald one that's good looking because he doesn't have the hair, and the other guy that can't get a straight haircut because he just is so cheap he won't have somebody else cut his hair. And Austin can't breathe. What did you expect with this one?
I struggle to follow that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's fine. It's interesting because I was looking forward to this episode. We've talked about this one for a while, and I was trying to think of the difference between frugal versus cheap. And I think it's in the eye of the beholder more than anything. And I think we can poke fun of each other for things that are cheap that we might consider frugal and go, no, that's definitely cheap. Or vice versa. or
Yeah.
ingenious. I don't know.
What's interesting is when I see someone, and again, this might be considered frugal by some people. I think like really. So I think you're right in some regard, but I've come across for people they almost refuse to pay for something that has value and that they need, could use whatever else, but they will not spend money. They will either figure out how to get it for free, how to have
Mhm.
someone else buy it for them, or how to, I mean, just or they just won't get it. I mean, they will not spend money on it. And I'm like, okay, it's affordable. It has a good value. Why wouldn't you just spend the money to get it versus trying to figure out how to not spending more effort figuring out how to not pay for it than just buying it?
Mhm.
And so that has really made me kind of scratch my head a few times when I've seen that. Like it almost seems like it's more work to figure out a workaround or get someone else to be the one to actually write the check than just to go and get it for yourself and be done with it. But the other one that always gets me, and this goes back to one of your first comments, because it's on sale. And there's been some times where, like family members, they have bought stuff because it was a really good price, and there's absolutely no reason why why it needed to be bought because it was a really good price. They could not walk away from like so.
But it was
Again,
on
that's not really a
sale.
frugal versus cheap necessarily, but exactly. It's like okay, what's the value of that? And is the is your do you have to have it that bad, or do you just want to say you got it for a really good price, even though you're never actually going to use it? I don't know. I could go on for days on that.
Yeah. Not to mention any names or
But
anybody that
yeah, I
you
think
know
you.
personally.
No, I'd never seen before in my
Yeah.
life except their family. So
Yeah. I this is one that
so to
I
your point, if it's in the eye of the beholder, which I think there's some validity to that statement,
Mhm.
how do we not appear to be cheap in the wrong context? Because I think that's where some of us might kind of falter is we try to be frugal, but it looks cheap. We try to be conscientious, but it looks like we just don't want to spend any money. I know that I have looked that way on occasion, but in my mind, I am being frugal. So let's try to figure this out of how do you be frugal without looking like you're being cheap,
well,
or
what I
can
think
you?
is funny is you say it and come from that angle, and I'm thinking this is hilarious from the standpoint of we don't care. We really don't
No, we don't.
care. I mean, if somebody, you know, somebody is complimenting me on my 10-year-old $2 button-up shirt, fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I was being cheap. I bought what I needed when I needed it. I didn't expect it to last 10 years. Frugal. Mm, I I don't know. I think we can poke fun at ourselves for some and have different takes on this because we really aren't doing it for other people's notice. I think that's
Yeah.
the big play in our society of materialism is what brand you're wearing or who's the it brand or who's the it influencer. Um, Note again that we're not making the millions because we're not promoting anybody's brand or anybody's stuff. We're talking about real life. As I sent you the article a few weeks ago, another
Mm-hmm.
budgeting app has gone down the drain. They've sold out. Why? Because this stuff is not. It's not flashy. It's
Fun.
not. getting the notice. It's not fun. No, it's discipline. It's intentionality. It's not fly by the seat of your pants and, oh, look, I don't have any money left. It's got to be somebody else's problem. Um, it's not easy. But when you get to this point and you buy stuff because you need it versus whose name is on it, so what? I mean, now you're going to have situations where you need to, if you're wanting to say something along the lines of you don't want to look cheap, do you have a specific incident that you're thinking of? For somebody will remain nameless, even if it's yourself. I mean,
So I guess where I see this playing out the most, and like I said, I've probably been guilty of it, but the outside looking in, might be easier to see. In a case where you have the money to make the purchase, but you just refuse to spend the money for whatever reason. Maybe you think that you can get it cheaper somewhere else. Maybe you don't think it's worth that much. Whatever the case is, maybe you just, I don't know. But you do not want to spend money on that item at that time. You'd rather either get it for free or have someone else, pay for you. So, it could be a deal where you're going to get, I guess one place I've seen this happen somewhat frequently is you ask for a nice gift, but you will not give a nice gift. You know what I'm saying? Or you ask for people to help you with something, but whenever you help, you try to do it as cheap as you possibly can. Those are a couple of instances I've seen where I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. Now, I am all about not overspending on gifts or, being conscious about helping someone and not, being tight or being lavish. But those two scenarios to me seem off balance and off kilter of, okay, are we being smart with our money or are we just not wanting to spend money and wanting everyone else to kind of cover the load, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I would say that isn't even on the same page as frugal versus cheap. I would say that's more of a character issue. And that's a sting for some people. If somebody's listening, they go, "Ooh, that was harsh." It is. For the examples that you're giving, that you're wanting something in return for as little as you can put in, that's a character issue. It's one thing to say, I've got $1 limit on what I'm going to buy as a gift, but if my limit's $20 and what I'm looking at is $18 versus I can get something that's cheap for $5 and you get the $5 thing, is the quality of the $5 item as good as the 18? If it is, great. If it is equal quality, same, and you're saving $13 on it, go for it. But
right.
If it is, I don't even know what brand to compare, but in essence, if you're going with a very nice item versus I think Oriental Trading Company where you can get 10 items for 10 cents.
Or something from a garage sale.
Yeah. I think that is outside of the realm of frugal versus cheap. And I think really, again, the eye of the beholder, who are you doing it for? Is it for you? Is it for somebody else? Who is it supposed to be for? Is the gift because you don't want to spend the money? Or are you trying to look good without putting what is it about appearance or is it about function?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, this
Yeah, and
I
I
didn't
think
think this was going to be a deep topic. I thought we were gonna. It was just going to be funny to say, cheap versus frugal, but I think there's a lot more to it, and I think we could use the same terms and mean exactly opposite things to where
right.
I look at it from a quality standpoint. But
Well, and you're right that you could, this. I mean, this whole conversation could be packaged in about 3 or 4 different ways, and frankly, like every conversation that we have, every episode that we do, you could talk about it from a multitude of different perspectives, and we can get very deep, very philosophical, like we always do in this podcast. You can also look at it from a very candid, comical element. Um, I do think that this conversation, today is more from a funny, lighthearted standpoint, which is great. Um, and you take that deeper level, and it does get to more of the personality and the character, and I feel like the people who do maybe exhibit those behaviors more, they probably have a different viewpoint of frugal and cheap than you and I do, right? I mean, it's probably, I
mhm,
think it goes back to that. Um, what what is your reasoning? What is your purpose? And yeah, it's always going to be maybe a little bit misconstrued if it's to an extreme level. Because you can also say that some people are way too lavish of givers, and they give over and above, and they do too much, and it's about them and what they're doing. Well, they may just love to give. There's some people that
mhm.
do not like to give. Not to say that that's wrong, but you're right. It's a character, it's a personality piece that for them, giving something of lesser value is just because they don't feel like they need to match or be in that same spot probably. Now, does it
Mhm.
look the best in my opinion? No, but we all have our own perspectives on, are you frugal? Are you cheap? Are you lavish? Are you whatever else? So I think you're right. You can look at it from any of those sides, kind of create your own definition, your own understanding of that. But when it comes down to it, it is about your money, how you want to manage it, but also being conscientious to, does this make sense? Because you and I, even we know when something doesn't make sense. Okay, yeah, we just need to, we need to spend the money on that, or we don't need to spend the money on that. And it's over the top there. We have that perception, that sense of understanding on how that looks. We probably all need to work on that a little bit, but I think you're spot on in the diversity of the conversation.
Mhm. Yeah, the appearances we talked about that before. The woman dressed to the hilt that couldn't rub two dimes together versus the what comes through the door looking like work and boots and overalls, but could put a default on a bank. Um, everybody's got a different definition, but it is about impressing somebody. Is about function. Um, what's the point? Who cares? what's
Hmm.
And I think this would be an interesting topic just to open up to our listeners of what's cheap versus what's frugal, and give an example. And this would be fun just to see. We would have an episode
Yeah,
just
no
on what
kidding.
people wrote in on what is cheap versus frugal and what somebody takes it as, or even a paradigm shift. You talk about that guy in overalls who flashes the cash that you never thought you had. Dave had a very good example of that in not spending the time with somebody
Yep.
because they were looking at a house that was, he was of the impression that the guy didn't have very much money. Guy had millions. I might be overstating that, but he had more than enough to cover that he could have written a check for what he wanted to purchase with whatever amenities
Hmm.
came with it, whatever changes he wanted. but he didn't look like it. Was he frugal? Was he cheap? Doesn't matter. He just didn't play the part
No one
for
knows.
somebody's perspective. Doesn't matter.
Yep.
Do you care? So just the whole idea of, I'd like to see what our listeners' perspective is on frugal versus cheap, and maybe if they have a situation where what they thought was a paradigm shift for them turned out to be completely a misjudgment on their part. And dare I say, we even have a third installment of this with our wives coming in and saying how frugal or cheap we are, or arguing that we aren't frugal or cheap. And I think both of our spouses would be chomping at the bit to get in on this one, to make fun of us, but also probably to give us some accolades
I think
on
you're
how
itching
well
to
we
get us
do in
ragged
some of
on.
these areas. Yeah, but there's nothing quite as cheap as using super glue on a pair of shoes. I would buy you a pair of shoes.
You had to end on that, didn't you?
I think that one takes the cake on cheap. I think it does. I think, yeah, I will tell you, the first time I
Well,
heard
I'll
you say
claim
that
it.
story, I'm like, oh my gosh, how, why? I could have bought you a pair of shoes if you really needed that pair of shoes. I could have. I
Remember
always,
that next time.
You remember that next time. Now, I'm not going to buy you anything over my $80, $60 limit. That was the limit I had when I was growing up as a kid.
Hey, I can get
I
4
still
pairs of
use that
shoes for
limit.
that.
That's right. You can, but how long will they last you?
Well, that
Without the super glue.
last pair was
Without the
about
super
10
glue.
years.
Yeah, that's right. I do have some. I have a pair of Doc Martens that I used in a Halloween costume. My wife goes, "Where did those come from?" I said, "I've got them. I've had them for 10 years." She's like, "I've never seen them before." Because they were on the bottom floor, or on the bottom shelf in a box. I don't wear them very much. I've worn
And
them.
by good
I don't
shoes,
know how
they
many
get worn
times since
twice
I
a
got them
year.
out. Oh yeah, I've got a pair of shoes that I've worn only to Cardinal games until my daughter decided to step on them at a rain delay. They're not so clean and purty anymore.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, so I'm going to extend our conversation just a little bit to remember when you would walk with us during the day in those boots, and I wondered how in the world you could walk 2 miles in those boots, but they must have been really comfortable
That's
boots.
why I made my
And
shoes
that's
the
where we
last
need
10
a
years. I
sponsor
wore boots all
endorsement.
the time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is true. But then again, I've made my boots last a long time because I don't ever wear them. Unless they're work boots.
What was that
and I have
song? These
fertilizer
old
rot
boots
those
were
out,
made to
but
travel, or something like that.
these boots were made for walking.
Yeah, I was like one of the few people that probably
That's
would
what the
ever
song
go on a
is. These
walk
boots were
in
made for
cowboy
walking.
boots.
And oh my gosh, it looked painful. It looked painful. But then again, I know how some of my boots fit me, and I would not be walking in 2 miles in them.
Well, you get used to wearing boots like literally every day, and it's like a shoe. Just fits like a glove on a sock.
They are like a shoe. They're a boot. It's a mitten. It's like a glove, but without fingers.
I had to give you one.
Start selling T-shirts. Yeah, thanks for the softball. Oh.
Well, folks, let us know what you think is frugal, what you think is cheap. Drop a comment in the Facebook page or over on Instagram. Shoot us an email. Let us know what you feel is too far or what you think is the perfect deal, frugal or cheap, where you sit. Bob, I'm glad we had this conversation. We've needed just a fun chat. We haven't had one of these fun rounds here for a while. I think we were due one. This was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, this one kind of hit the rabbit trails. I almost want to apologize
And the
to
beagle's
those
still a
our
chasing.
listeners that stayed this long. Yeah. This will definitely make the top 10 for when we go to our next top. It might be 5 of the top 10. It might be 10 of the top 10. It just might be our top 10. We might have to wait
It
another
might
year
be
before
11
we
of the
get
top
back to
10.
that because it might be if you're being cheap, you know.
Right.
We're going to squeeze an extra one out of those 10.
Well, folks.
Woo!
Number 10 and a half. There we go. 10 and a half out of 11. Well, folks, for those of you who stuck around, thanks for laughing with us and at us and for us and against us, and hope that next week you get to have another wonderful experience. We'll get serious again at some point, but we always like to have a little bit of fun. Because if you can't laugh at yourself, laugh at other people, right, Bob?
Yeah, laugh at me. I'm good for it every once in a while. Austin sure gets his mileage.
Okay, no problem. Taken care of.
And
all right, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on The Heart of Money.